All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. My name is Andy Howard. I'm founder and managing director of Howard & Associates, which is a consulting company that helps organizations implement video communications, so video conferencing and video streaming predominantly. Today's topic is beyond corporate communications and training. So this session is really focused on enterprise video and how enterprises are now using video beyond sort of the traditional applications, which have usually been, CEO broadcast, training, things like that, and are now doing a lot more outbound focused stuff. So we have a great panel here, and let's get going. So again, my name is Andy Howard. I have a consulting company. I've done work with a lot of great organizations such as Deloitte, BlackRock, and Travelers, Aetna, NYU. So a lot of experience in the sort of traditional enterprise space, but I've also done a couple of interesting projects for some sort of non-traditional applications like Proxy Bid, which is an online auction company, as well as with Anthem, we helped them build a video call center application. So the panelists, we have Lisa, and I'm going to butcher your last name.
That's okay. Want me to introduce myself?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Okay. So hi, I'm Lisa Figura, and I am the Vice President of Customer Experience Support for Harte Hanks. I've been with Harte Hanks for 20 years, and my role is designing technical solutions as well as people support resources for the end user. So I work with clients like HBO, Turner Sports, NBA, NCAA, WWE, clients that have subscribers, and we work on the subscriber journey. So meeting the subscribers in the channel of their choice, phone, email, chat, social, regardless of the channel, and delivering an excellent experience.
I'm Dan.
Absolutely. I'm Dan Sokolow. I am what they call an accidental technologist, which is what happens when your history degree ends up in sort of strange places. I've been involved in the online video space for getting close to 15 years now, including those days of the small postage stamp videos on a Windows media server I shouldn't have been using. And I now run a small consulting company focusing really on content management projects, both web-based projects as well as video-based production and things around that area.
Great. Simon?
Hi, yeah, I'm Simon Ball. I'm a Senior VP at West Digital Media Solutions. We run a business unit that specializes in webcasting, PR, website communications. I'm not an accidental techie. I started my career way back a long time ago in TV broadcasting and transitioned into internet broadcasting around 20 years ago now. Very good.
Okay, so here's the agenda for the session. As we said before, the typical enterprise applications tend to be, the CEO broadcast, corporate communications, training, digital signage, things like that. But now we're starting to see organizations implement video either as a business model, which Lisa will be able to talk to a little bit more, or integrating that into some sort of other process, integrating the video into a business process. We'll be able to talk about some of those applications. So that's really what the focus of the session will be on. A couple reasons for these shifts, I think, are, if people are going to start to use video as a revenue generation tool, it needs to work. It needs to really be solid. And I think the industry, as you've seen from the show here, has really gotten to that point where you can make very high quality video work on the internet. And that, speaks to the third bullet point there too, where it's more bandwidth, and then that creates a better user experience. So it's not the postage stamp size video where you're looking at it like that. It's, full screen video on laptops, on tablets, on TVs even, and so there's lots of opportunities there. Everybody uses video now. People are familiar with it. It's going to be more than 80% of the traffic on the internet by 2020, and streaming is really a business for a lot of companies now. And that's, Lisa's helping out a lot of organizations with their customer service from that side. So why don't we go through and talk about some specific applications that you guys have all seen in your businesses. And so why don't we start with you again, Lisa?
Sure. I think some of the enhancements to the end user support experience that we've been working on recently is really are data driven. So a lot of the companies that are here at the conference are all the different pieces and parts that deliver live data about the stream, right? What's happening with the player, knowing everything about the customer. So we work with our clients to get that data exposed real time to our teams of agents who are supporting them. So whether they're in the pre-purchase, I'm thinking about becoming a subscriber, and I want to be able to interact on self-serve, phone, email, tweet, however they reach out, whether they're buying and in the purchase process where you can offer a proactive chat, how can we help you, can we help you sign up, to the post-purchase, I'm trying to set this up on Roku and I don't know how, or I have a new device, it's not working on my Apple TV. So the technical support end, and then supporting all the billing processes, auto renewal, those sorts of things. So really just delivering, our role is to deliver an exceptional experience along the entire journey, along the entire subscriber journey, and that's really, lends itself to having a very strong technical foundation and a strategy that allows you to leverage the data.
And these are big, I mean, these are big providers, right? I mean, it's
huge. Yeah, we work with a lot of major
WWE
sports, NBA, HBO. We get 15,000 hits a second on our self-service site for HBO Now, and especially in and around the Game of Thrones viewings. It's incredibly popular, and so fielding all of that traffic correctly, efficiently, is really critical for them to be able to retain existing customers.
Dan, how about you? What are you seeing out there?
So I look at things a little bit differently only because I tend to focus more on the content side rather than the support and technical side. Some of what I'm seeing is people starting to get interested in supplementing other things that they're doing by adding video to products that they already issue. So if they issue a report of some kind, annually, quarterly, whatever it may be, they're starting to now think about, how do I supplement this with a video piece so that I can, first of all, get my principals, my experts here associated with this information, and how can I really break down what may be a 30 or 40 page report into a much more consumable level of content, so that then they can leverage things like that outside of just, well, here's my traditional distribution, you get an email with a PDF link or something like that, to now you can watch my subject matter expert talk for, it doesn't have to be long, it could be 60 seconds or 2 minutes, and just you start to associate your people with the information that they're sharing and build up credibility that way.
Simon.
It's great to hear you both coming from these angles, actually. And also what's really heartwarming for me is that there's a need for HBO to have this service because it's not perfect all the time. And we all know it is. And one of the challenges we face is videos become so ubiquitous, and so lack of fault tolerance across the whole sort of corporate space when you're doing, whether you're doing investor relations communications or whether you're doing marketing communications. Because of that sort of HBO dynamic, everyone expects it to work 100% of the time. And we all know that the challenges that you have with traversing the internet and various networks and desktop configurations and everything, it kind of doesn't work 100% of the time. And you do your best to get it to work 99.9% of the time. So it's an interesting dynamic there. And we have to focus on that. You pointed out on the slide that there is no tolerance for failure. And a lot of our investment is very much orientated around ensuring that you have a resilient pathing and everything in place to ensure its success. And also interesting to hear you talk about content as well, because at the end of the day, it really is all about the content, and the technology is just a mechanism for getting that content to the desired eyeballs. And so we're developing, we actually released ideas where we put embedded video into press releases now. So it's a media snippet product that does exactly what you said, which is gives the intended external audience, whether it's your investment, institutional, retail investment, or the press, an insight in the message that's being conveyed, typically from a corporation that's announcing a product launch or a financial result or any of those things. So you're seeing this convergence across lots of different mediums as well.
It's interesting. I just wanted to comment on something that he said. The initial strategy meetings that we have with a lot of these organizations start with, but the video is perfect, or but we've spent this X amount of dollars to make it perfect. And so we have to sort of talk them through the fact that that part from a user experience doesn't really matter, because they're still going to not know their password. There's still so much user error or lack of education. There's this big divide between what people in this industry know and understand about the stream experience and what the end user knows and their knowledge level. And so there's always going to be questions of how to set it up on new devices. There's always going to be billing issues. There's always going to be a need to engage, get feedback from customers about what they like and don't like about the content, or how things are positioned and how they'd like it to be different, like in live sports and those sorts of things. And so I think this industry, what's really fun for me is I've been working in customer experience for 25 years, and streaming is one of the newer industries that we support. But like retail and tech and consumer electronics and many of those industries, the customer experience is going to be a real differentiator. So as this industry grows, those that stay in the game are going to be those that have invested in engaging with their customers and making it a great experience.
Yeah, that's interesting, because from what all of you are saying is, I know in the enterprise environment, implementing a streaming solution internally for more like the corporate communication stuff is probably one of the more difficult technologies to implement, because there's so many groups that touch on it. You've got sort of the AV people in one corner, and they do things one way, and you've got the networking people over here, and they're saying, don't mess up my network. And then you have the security people, the corporate communications folks. So you have to get them all together in a room and get them to agree on things. Is that one of the challenges that you're seeing out there? Because it seems like it's coming at it from the technology side, where the technology people are like, this service is ready to go, but there's a lot of other business pieces that are not quite there. So is that sort of the experience you're finding?
Absolutely. There have been many instances in which we get called in, and it's almost a fire drill of sorts. Like everything else is in place, and the UI's done, and we've done every part of this, but what about the customers? Who's going to respond to their questions, and who's going to help them get to their content if they have trouble or don't understand, or those sorts of things. So as it evolves, the great news is it becomes very intelligent, and I think initially when we started working in streaming, the companies had a lot of data and information about what was happening, but weren't exposing it to folks like myself who run the customer support. And today, all that data is being exposed. So we know if there's a geolocation problem, we know if there's a problem or trend with a specific device. So all this real-time data of availability as the industry evolves is very useful in supporting a customer faster, which is obviously what they want. It's one of those industries where they don't want to wait 2 seconds to get their issue solved, because they're trying to stream something live. So if I'm in the middle of the NCAA championship game, I'm not going to wait. It's not a 24-hour email turnaround time, right? It's an immediate alert on Twitter that something is wrong, and it has to be a real-time fix, and that communication between the customer support channels back to the company needs to be real time, or there will be a lot of upset customers.
What's interesting to me from my perspective is that when you run into those problems with implementing a process or a platform or whatever it may be, these aren't failures of technology.
Right.
That's
They're
right.
almost always failures of thought process, which is they didn't sit down before they started and say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? How will we know when we've accomplished whatever it is? So they end up getting everything together, and perhaps they drop off on the IT department, here, guys, find us a streaming platform. And so they do some research and they find a platform, and it's a perfectly wonderful platform, but then nobody stopped to say, what is it I actually want to get done? And if you don't do that before you start, you suddenly find yourself going through customizations and things that are out of scope and all the other things that can break down on an IT project because you didn't ask the right questions of the right people at the right time. So what's important, and this is true for internal training things like you talked about earlier, or these other exercises you're going through to sell content, if you want to your end users, which is, where's my goalpost, and what are the steps I have to take to get there successfully? And if you don't do that first, you're going to end up wasting time, money, and effort.
Absolutely. That's really interesting, because that's really why I started the consulting company, because I used to work for a streaming provider, vBrick Systems, that was focused on the enterprise. And when I was working for them, one of the things I would find is that people would come to us and they had no idea what they were doing. It was like somebody said, we got to find a streaming solution. So they started just looking around at everybody, and then they picked the one that looked the best, and then they didn't have any forethought into, who's going to manage this, who's going to create the content, who's going to be able to publish it, all that kind of stuff. So that ended up being a difficult implementation. You kind of went backwards when you should be going forward. So that's interesting that that's happening. It's the same problems, just different.
The truth is it never changes. We could be talking here about streaming or about billing systems or anything else. This is always where these things break down, is because the right people aren't having these conversations. You talk about managing. Well, it's great that you have the software in place or you have the infrastructure, but where's the person who's going to be watching this day after day after day?
Right.
And if that person isn't there and doesn't have executive support behind whatever it is they're doing, then you're basically dooming yourself to failure.
I think increasingly, certainly over the last few years, we've been finding that streaming is just a component. It's part of the use case. It's part of the workflow, and we've turned that corner. So when we look at customer problems that need solving, or communication needs that are external to the enterprise, and it's more so external to the enterprise than internal to the enterprise. Internal in the enterprise, your message is, your desire is employee engagement, and it's really just video and some interactivity. Outside of the enterprise, your goals are different. If it's investor relations, it's compliance and ensuring reliability and robustness, and it works, and you're compliant with regulation. If it's marketing communications, it's a return on investment. How many leads am I generating from this communication? And to that extent, streaming is only one sort of step in that life cycle, in that value chain. And so looking for companies that think more broadly around the application is certainly, when you're engaging in those communications, is what I would advise people to do. Marketing is a classic example of that. You're going to need integration into marketing automation tools. You should be using your methods to engage, to attract an audience, whether it's via influencer networks and targeting, or media databases to get to the media. And you should be then at the end of the value chain, once you delivered the message, the thought leadership piece, the website, the piece of video, be monitoring the impact of that, both from a sort of engagement perspective, who watched it, but also from a market sentiment perspective as well. And if you can combine that complete life cycle, then streaming is actually a component within that. And I think that's what's materially different these days with external communications. And like the content at the beginning of the chain and the support at the end of the chain, they're all very much adjunct to the task of streaming.
So I'm going to use that as a good segue of example of a company that I've worked with, which is that auction company I mentioned, which is called Proxy Bid. And so to Simon's point, this is an online auction company, and they typically auction off heavy equipment like tractors, 18-wheelers, things like that. So there's a big location in the Midwest usually somewhere, or there's actually a big one in Florida. Also, they bring all these people in, and then they literally run a truck down and past all these 18-wheelers, and they just auction them off one after the other. So, in an auction, if you think about an auction, if you have one bidder or two bidders, then typically the price doesn't go up. But if you expand the pool of your bidders, then you can expand, the revenue that you're going to generate. So, what these guys said was that when they do an online auction, the prices are typically 40% higher than what they get if they just do the offline auction. So they wanted to be able to stream the video alongside the live auction so that they can get more bidders. And obviously one of their requirements for that, and there's a ton of conversation about that I think at the show, is it's got to be really low latency, right? It can't be one of these things where the video is a minute off of the off of the actual auction, because then you might want to bid on it, but it's already over. So this is just an example of sort of their web page, and here's a machine auction, and then so you come in here and you go into the auction page, and this is all still flash based, so because they had to get down to that 2-second latency. Oh, there's nothing in there right now. Let me try another one. So in this case, they're just showing some piece of heavy equipment here. But typically, like when they're doing the tractors and stuff, they're literally lined up one after the other, and they have a big pickup truck with a production crew on it that just rolls down, stops, walk around the thing, then that auction ends, they go to the next one. So it's really, really pretty interesting, but I think this is a good example of a company that's using streaming both as part of an entire solution, but is using it in a way that's really important to the business because it's generating a lot of revenue. So just wanted to jump in with that example there. Why don't we take this little break here to see if there's any questions from the audience or any good examples that you have of things where you've seen streaming be integrated in for some more customer-facing type things. Anybody? Yeah.
So the live pay-per-view a few months ago with Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson, was that a failure of thought process or of technology?
I think it was a failure of golfing. Like, weren't they both? I didn't watch it, but I heard that they were both awful that day, and
I don't know anything about sports.
Yeah.
Just disclaimer. No, but in terms of the live stream, because they basically had to make it free because they had so many problems with the.
Oh,
It's
really?
the same thing with
Oh, I
the
didn't realize that.
UFC. I don't know if you saw all the UFC news, but they had a UFC event, and there was a problem with the stream. It's one of the recent really big ones, and then they had to end up offering it free. So we got the communication in. Anybody that wants, and that was really a load issue.
And I think in these cases, it could be a failure of testing, meaning did you run
The
through
load,
your
right.
systems end to end? Did you have backups? Did everything switch over? And honestly, it's live. Sometimes when you do live things, really bad things happen. the expectation is high. We talked about this earlier. The expectation is this stuff is just going to work. And if you're NBC or the Golf Channel, or not to pick anybody out, but if you're the people providing that service, the expectation is that the service is going to work, which means if you planned it out carefully, and if you've got the redundancy, and if you've done your testing, then hopefully everything works. And you know, if there's a freak thing, then sometimes that happens.
Yeah, there are a lot of failure points, potential failure points with all the different integrations that are in place to make it all happen. And one of the things we did this year, so last year during one of the very significant major events, there was a failure point in a piece of Oracle software, which was connected. It had nothing to do with the stream. It had everything to do with the mechanism that was helping people get signed up. And so their piece of software went down, and it happens. I don't know if it was the load on their particular piece of software or what, but it went down. And so this year we had to build a significant amount of redundancy outside of Oracle, so that if anything like that should happen, we could real-time transition to a portal that had no potential of failing. And so it's sort of live and learn. It was a painful lesson last year. You know, they had to give a lot of subscribers their money back, and these are tough lessons, right, for this industry. But along the way, we're getting smarter every time, and building redundant points and doing better testing and those types of things.
Yeah, I think one of the things, well, first of all, testing a scenario like that with that many users is just really hard to do. And not only that, but a lot of times when people do the testing, they think, oh, it's a video. Video's got a lot of traffic. I mean, it's a lot of bandwidth, right? So we really need to make sure the video is solid. So we'll throw a load test against the streaming servers and make sure that they can handle it. But then their paywall site can't handle, 50,000 people coming literally all at once to sign up for something. So that just melts down. So maybe the streaming's working perfectly in the background, but the front end fell apart. That also used to happen quite a bit in enterprise streaming. People, all the users would come to the webcast and hit a site and have to authenticate to the site to make sure they could access it, and then the site just melted down, but the streaming was working fine if you could actually get to it. So
it's really back to your point of the planning all of the elements to what you're trying to achieve in the very beginning, and laying out how you're going to get there.
And a certain amount of crossing your fingers and hoping things work the way you tried.
There's that.
all right, well, so what are some things that, like, what's coming next? What are some things that we think are some trends that are going to move forward in the industry to, really make it so that video is everywhere within in anything that you do within business? Do you see anything out there, Simon, that you're?
Yeah, I mean, the proliferation, because we work for corporations. Our mission is to advance the way corporations communicate, and so it's always from that perspective, right? We're seeing that there is increasing demand for continuous programming, where you've not seen that before. A webcast was a point in time, and you maybe do one or two a week, and you do it, but both in organizations and corporations, continuous programming. And so having not just video portals, but the ability to output to multiple channels like OTT. Mm-hmm. So actually we're seeing an adoption of more OTT in the corporate enterprise, because it's very easy to use that as a destination point, particularly in sort of community cafeterias and other locations around the corporate campus.
So you're saying like, I don't know, Craft or something like that.
Yeah.
Say it has Craft TV, and they're like, oh, we'll do it internally, but then you say, well, we've got a lot of brand building too. Why don't we build
Exactly.
channel.
So I actually there's an example, HIMSS. They are an organization that is non-for-profit in the healthcare industry. They help promote good use of technology and information within that industry, and they have a lot of companies contribute to that. And so we set up literally a television studio, ran a series of interviews, outputted it, or syndicated it to social media, into the Facebook pages, and over OTT as well. We see that there's a greater desire to increase the syndication points of where you're sending content, whether it be OTT or whether it be Facebook Live or whether it be Periscope or Twitter or any of those destinations. There's definitely an uptick in that, and companies that are embracing that are obviously going to be part of that shift.
Yeah. What about quality, Dan? We talked about quality a little bit before.
So, to my mind, the cost curve continues to drop if, and this is a big if you're prepared to accept a slightly lesser level of quality. We've got great professionals here right now videotaping us, but companies, including smaller companies, can, if they're prepared to make some relatively manageable expenses, get themselves their own equipment. The DSLR market now is providing very good quality recording at a very budget-friendly price. And if you can get internal people to get comfortable with the equipment, or maybe they already have that comfort level, let them do the production for you. Your end result may be not quite at the level of hiring a professional company for it. And if you're in the content business, if you're in the streaming content business, this won't fly. But if you're in some other line of business, taking advantage of what is now a much lower cost of production, get yourself some software, get yourself some cameras, get yourself some lenses, and producing content that matters to the people you care about. That's one of the big things, especially for these enterprise customers. They don't need to go viral. They don't need tens of millions of people. You want to hit the people that matter to you. So they'll accept a lower level of content quality because they're used to it. They've seen cell phone videos. They've seen stuff that's shot that's not what we would consider certainly broadcast ready. But if you can take advantage of that, you suddenly have this entirely new process available for content creation, and you can just start to crank things out without necessarily having to say, I'm going to hire a company at $10,000 a day or whatever it may be to go ahead and do a full-blown production that's only going to go so far.
I think you can actually get quality at low prices as well.
I think so.
And we just look at an iPhone 10. I mean, the picture you get out of that is outstanding. Now, the audio isn't very good, but there's
ways around it.
There's ways around it.
Yeah.
We like using our studio product because effectively it's a switcher in the cloud, right? So I can connect via video conferencing, I can connect via my desktop camera, I can connect from a studio camera. In this year, I'll be able to connect from my mobile phone, and I don't need any equipment. I've got these various endpoints that are connecting to me, and I'm switching between them in a web-based user interface and streaming them out as a stream that I can then target hundreds of thousands of users.
As a caveat, I will say you have to know what's going on. If you're recording your CEO, get yourself something a little bit better. Don't necessarily sit there with an iPhone. But on the other hand, somebody mentioned in one of the earlier sessions about an executive who was traveling town hall to town hall to town hall, was perfectly happy when they showed him, get me a tripod and a tablet, and was very happy to be using that as a production mechanism. Why not? Take advantage of it. It's there, it's affordable, and as you say, the quality is getting better and better as we go on.
At the end of the day, actually, even your sort of $40 desktop camera is HD these days. It's not about the camera, it's about the lighting that's around you.
Yeah, and
you can make a CEO look really great simply by giving him a bit of key light and a bit of backlight.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can create a studio with a closet and a backdrop and a couple lights and camera for $5,000 or something like that. That's pretty good, or even less than that. I also think that there's sort of a new, there's going to be a new group of people that are coming into the workforce that are very familiar with video, because they use it all the time on their phones. They're even my kids play lacrosse, and this year they actually recorded all the games for the high school team, and they put them up, and they pay the kids from the video broadcasting class to actually come and do the games, and then they sell subscriptions. So my parents bought a subscription for $10 a month so they could watch their grandkids play in the games, and
That's great.
the quality's not great, but it's better than nothing. It's one of those things. It's not ESPN, but it's not. It's better than not being able to see the game. Right?
And it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't have to be ESPN. That's one of the critical things. People now want to see the content that they want to see, and they've gotten used to seeing stuff that's maybe not as high quality, and better to get it out, better to produce, better to deliver content, because why not? People will watch it. And if you get the people you care about, the people with the purchasing decisions or whatever else you're trying to reach, then you've done your job here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think to that end, you're talking about the future. The future of this and those companies that will, I think, survive and thrive in this space are going to be those that are listening to their customers, right? Those that know exactly what they want, that can real time hear what they want. I don't like the way the stats are showing on when I'm watching my golf or whatever it is. There are ways with customer support technology to know exactly what customers want in any channel, and to take all that data real time and feedback product improvements and content improvement. So everything that's happening in that user experience can be conveyed by customers and will be conveyed by customers, but those companies that are capturing it, leveraging speech analytics and things like that to really know what kind of conversations customers are having about their content, about the video, about the entire experience, those that are listening are going to be the ones that will be standing and thriving.
Yeah, that reminds me of something I just read recently. It's another sports example, but the Masters is one of the biggest golf tournaments in the world. And a few years ago they were starting to do the streaming, and you could see like the 15th hole and everybody coming through the 15th hole. Well, this year they said that with IBM they were literally filming every shot. So every player on the course is getting filmed every shot, and then they were using the IBM, like the Watson, I guess, analytics to figure out what was a good shot. So I guess there was some algorithm of the crowd noise, people standing up, or things like that. You can tell, and it learns that over time. And for every single player, for every day that they're out there, it automatically created a 3-minute clip for them. And then they would have some humans go in and review them and say, that's not really a good shot. Like that was the crowd roaring from another shot, and then they can splice it. But the amount of production that created just automatically allows it to just be more and more video content that they can get out there. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I was just nodding because AI is obviously a big buzzword, and when you talk about what's happening in the future, I think every company in this communications industry has an eye on how can I use technology to make be more productive and be more efficient and offer more value to our customers.
Yeah.
And so simple voice to text on everything that we're doing allows searchability, but can you then take that voice to text and use some of the algorithms that are available from Google and IBM and others to actually look at the intonation of the words and the sentence structure and how the words are used to then get a sentiment analysis based upon the structure of the sentence, and then advise the corporation next time they're writing the script for their piece that these are the words you should be avoiding.
Yeah.
And this is and
Don't ever say the word fired
happening.
in the webcast.
And it's not far from happening now, and it's all about volume of content, because an algorithm works by learning, right? So, the more content you have and the more ease of analyzing it, the better. So I do see that will be something that's in the near future that we'll be able to offer that service.
Agreed.
Maybe not this year, but next.
Right. All right, were there, that was a good question before. Any other questions or any other examples of things that you've been seeing out there? Anybody want to talk to? No? All right, well, I'll give another example of a customer that I worked with, which is Anthem. So I mean, I'm sure most people with their health insurance now are starting to get the opportunity where you can actually do a doctor's visit or visit a nurse online. And so I worked on a project for Anthem way back in the day where they were trying to build this themselves, and then they ended up deciding that it was better to outsource it and work with a third party that's sort of specializing in that. But basically, you know, you come in here as an Anthem customer and you sign up for an account for this Live Health Online, and then you can go in and basically you know, do a doctor's visit online. So if you have like a rash or something like that, I mean, obviously if you got a broken limb and you're bleeding, you're gonna go to the emergency room, but a lot of the visits to both doctors and emergency rooms are completely unnecessary, and they end up costing the health insurance company a lot of money in two ways. Number one is, if you think about it, when you go to the emergency room, the health insurance company has to reimburse that doctor and the hospital or whatever for your visit, and they don't make any money off of it. So if they can get people to use their own doctors and nurses, then they win on both sides, because they get to take the revenue in, and it's probably going to be less than, you know, what the doctor, you know, the third party doctor would charge them, and they don't have to pay that third party doctor. So they win on both sides. So this is hugely important for the health insurance industry, and again, it's a way of integrating video into a larger overall process.
Is it a video chat?
Yeah,
Essentially?
it's essentially, yeah, you sign up, then you know, there's like a virtual waiting room,
Okay.
and then eventually it'll say your doctor's ready. Do you want to go? And you go in.
That's great.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot more use cases for video chat. In our world, it's another channel, right? Where and when is video chat appropriate versus regular chat? Where does it make sense? We did a project with Volvo where this was a way they wanted to introduce their new cars, right? So you can video chat and check this out. Let's look at the engine.
So a person actually goes around the car with you? Oh, that's cool.
So there's certain use cases for video chat, like troubleshooting higher end electronics, phones, those sorts of things where you can video in and say, this is the problem, and then they say, okay, I know how to fix that problem, because you showed to them exactly what's wrong.
For customer service,
it can be a lot more efficient method of serving a customer. Video chat's a little bit more expensive channel, but not if you consider that the phone call would have taken 30 minutes and they solved it in 5 minutes because they were able to expose the problem. So it's a more expensive channel head to head, but it can be a lot less overall because it's the right channel to solve a problem in.
Yeah, and especially if you can, like if it's a technology type thing and you're able to share your screen and say, this is the problem I'm having, rather than the person saying, well, have you checked your this and that? And you're like, yes, I did.
Go to your control
panel. I'm a technologist. I know what I'm doing here. So, so are there any other specific examples you guys wanted to touch on of things out there that
Well, there's one I'll bring up, which is someplace I think enterprises should be going, and I don't think a lot of them are, and they're not going for a specific reason, which is around user-generated content coming from within the enterprise. You've got in your enterprise hundreds, perhaps thousands of people who are very, very smart, know their products, know their techniques very well. I think it would be good for enterprises to be going out and having these people communicate on their own. Many of them are doing it anyway, because a lot of them are out there. They may have their own YouTube channels, whatever the case may be. To have those people with a deep knowledge and a deep passion for the tools is just as good an ambassadorship as you can find, because they know it, they love it, and all they want to do is talk about it. The problem, and the thing that I think is holding a lot of companies back, is the risk profile of this. Companies, especially larger and more established companies, get very, very nervous about potential risks of allowing their people to go out and say things without having somebody keep an eye on it. The problem to me with a kind of moderated approach to this is that you're basically killing the entire process. The process is to allow this to be organic. One of the marketing terms I keep hearing lately is authenticity, right? They want authentic. You don't get more authentic than some engineer who's found some really clever hack for some way of working with a software product. The instant you get somebody in the way, you get a risk officer or a lawyer or a marketing person, somebody gets in the way and says, wait a second, how are we phrasing this? It really kills that authentic feel of it. So what I try and encourage the enterprises to do is, within the bounds of reason, lighten up a little bit on the risk concerns. You can set guidelines. You can tell people, look, here's what you can do. There are certain things we don't want you to say because it could bring liability, and then maybe there are disclaimers, all the other ways that they can deal with this. But you're really one of your best assets to reaching outside the company are happy and engaged employees that you have inside. You talked about engagement before. These people may love their work. Let them become someone selling your company by going out there in channels they're on anyway and talking about something they love, something they care about, something that's been bothering them. Because you start to build communities this way, and you start to spread the brand messages without formally spreading brand messages.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that, go ahead.
Funny you should say ambassadors of a product, because actually customers themselves are the best advocates for the product.
Yeah.
And so capturing that, and there's tools around, obviously we have tools as well, that actually facilitate the ability for referrals from happy users, capturing those happy users, running a referral campaign, like if you refer 5 people, and that as a piece of video, which we've not done yet, but you've just sparked the idea, is actually quite an engaging thing, particularly if you're using social network as a sort of endpoint for it.
Yeah, it's really, in the customer experience world, we see the same thing in social media where companies, the budget to support their customers from a social media perspective is if somebody posts something on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram that is not favorable to the company, to get it down, to take them out of that channel and solve it, because you don't want it to go viral and you don't want others to jump on the bandwagon and that sort of thing. But the big miss, and what we try to push and encourage, is engaging with the fans, right? So companies are only responding to the bad things, and responding to the good things and interacting with people who love your product, who have followers, to engage with them and find out more what do they love about your product. That's really a way of letting good things go viral, and it's sort of a big miss in the
That's
customer
funny,
experience
because I was
world.
thinking, you made me think back to, I think it was like a year ago now, where there was all sorts of these videos coming off of the airplane,
Yes.
disasters, and like, could you imagine a worst case scenario for you as an airline as to seeing somebody getting literally dragged off of your plane? So yeah, and then you started seeing it get turned around where they started showing like the happy Southwest person singing the
Yep.
song and
Yep.
you know doing things like that. I don't think that was by accident.
No, I don't, no,
no.
definitely not.
It wasn't. No.
But you know, you can, how you respond to these things, and this is kind of outside of the sort of streaming context. Video is just a tool to use for this, but how you respond to the viral video of a guy getting dragged off your airplane
Right.
says a lot about your company.
Yeah.
And if you handle it correctly, then listen, you're not going to, the damage is there. There's nothing you can do about it. But there are ways that you can respond that either you end up looking like, you know, big mean old company is trying to
Yeah.
smack people down, or leveraging it to improve things as best
Yeah.
you can.
Right.
Exactly.
Have you run into personalized video? I think that's rather an exciting thing that sort of companies are out there that are doing, which is personalizing video according to your geographic location or according to the detail that you may have provided to you as, about your viewers and identifying those viewers. An example of it is like a concert tour. Only the local to your area venue is the one that's pulled up as part of the sting, and if you're in a different area, it's a different concert date and a different time. And that's kind of the fact that we have the technology and the ability to do that is quite exciting, and the applications that could have as well. An award ceremony, I can get a video award of me getting the award in my video, as opposed to having to watch the whole thing. It's personalized
Right.
to me. My details about my buying habits. Scary, but also quite exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen also sort of email campaigns that do that too,
Yeah.
where they'll shoot a video, which can be very, not generic, but relatively generic, and then intersperse things like with your name
Yeah.
in there, so that it is personalized to you. And you're like, wow, they made this just for me. Well, they really didn't. It's just like a one text overlay or something like that.
Right.
It's
But,
just amusing when they get the merges wrong, and it's, dear recipient.
right.
And,
Dear valued customer.
exactly.
And then the other thing I was thinking was, we talked a lot about, all this content that's being generated, and it's more and more and more. And once all that content's generated, how do you discover stuff that is now relevant to you, right? Like, what kind of things you see out there where people are trying to solve that problem? I know a lot of the speech-to-text type thing, like Simon was talking about before, you can search for a specific term and it'll take you to those cue points in the video
Right.
where your search term is. That's one way people are starting to do it, but I don't know if you've seen anything else of interest out there for, how do you tame all this video that's being created?
That's a good question. I think most people are, are self-curating in their social media accounts
Yeah.
and what they listen to. It would be interesting to have a tool that's curated for you, but that's what they try to do.
Yeah.
That's exactly what search engines are doing. Is
Or
attempting to
Netflix
create
with like
content
their
that
recommended
you think is
content.
going to trigger you to purchase something.
Right.
It would be nice if there was an organization that was free that created content purely on based the fact that you may be interested in it, and not try to sell you something.
I don't honestly, from what I've heard recently, including here at this conference, this is not a problem that's solved yet.
Yeah.
Search is sort of the holy grail of working your way through video. There is so much content out there that sorting through it, people keep talking about YouTube being like the #2 search engine around the world because of how many times people are searching through it to find things. And I don't know how successful they're being at actually doing it, because tagging is not always applied regularly and not always applied correctly, and it still needs human beings to get in there and sort of help it along.
Yeah. Well, and YouTube also, at least for me, is like the #1 place to go to for trying to figure out how to do something.
Right.
You know, like
Right.
I had an issue with my sump pump, and it wasn't working. It was running just constantly. So I'm like, this thing's going to burn out. And then, you know, I searched for the model number on YouTube, and a guy had created a video of this is how you fix it, and I actually fixed it. I was very proud of myself.
That's great.
See, and that's again where the enterprise can step in. Why are you finding Joe the sump repairman?
Yeah, right.
Why isn't the
Not even the
company-
sump repairman, like just some regular
guy.
person that
Right.
did it himself.
So why isn't the enterprise going out there and doing this?
Yeah,
And
right.
saying, here's our engineer who built the bloody thing,
Right.
and he'll tell you why this thing is coming up, and here's how you can fix it. Draw your eyes back to the company that you bought it from in the first place, build the reputation as a customer-friendly company,
Right.
and then fewer calls to the
Yes.
help desk saying, what's going on?
Right.
That's right.
The challenge there is that quite often these companies are rather stuffy.
Yep.
And so having an evangelizer even on staff that, you know, can be entertaining, like a YouTube personality or some Joe in the garage kind of .com kind of guy, that's a challenge too. They don't necessarily have that person or see the advantage to that.
I think that's
Yeah.
absolutely correct. Many companies, too many, I think, take that sort of stuffy approach to things. And again, that whole authentic thing, it feels like corporate guy got tasked with showing you this thing instead of, hey, I've had the same problem you have, let's fix it.
All right, we just have a couple minutes left. Any more questions or comments from the crowd? Anything you guys would like to close with?
I have, if anybody is interested, I brought some jump drives with some case studies and example of what a best-in-class customer end-user experience looks like for the streaming space, and I'd be happy to share them. If anybody wants one, just come up after. I'll give one to you.
If I had a
Yeah.
final thought, I would just say do it. Just shoot the video, produce it, publish it, get it out there. Because the knowledge is there, why shouldn't you take advantage of it, whether that's for revenue or not? It's an important means of communication now.
I guess my final comment is it's so ubiquitous now. We've been external video communications in various guises, whether it's for marketing, internal communications, press relations, or investor relations. All of those things has been around for a while, and I think technology is a level playing field mostly, and you need to find a provider that you trust to deliver that for you. And I would say that the human touch part of it is still incredibly important.
Okay, well, I think there's one more round of sessions at 3:15, and then I think there's like a final keynote at 4 o'clock. So hopefully everybody will be able to attend those. And thank you very much for coming, and thanks for the interactivity. And enjoy the rest of the show, and safe travels home.